Face to face, hand to hand, film to film.
Welcome to the Film to Film podcast. I am your host today, James Shergan, joined here by my good friend, Iñaki. How are you doing?
Doing well. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone. Is this our first one post New Year? I guess it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the last one was the club, because we wanted to end the podcast on the note, a new church for a new world. That's going to be basically the same as the old one. So, hey, Happy New Year's.
Yeah.
2022. It's probably going to be as shitty as 2021.
Start out with some very low expectations, and hopefully we can exceed them. I'm slightly more optimistic than you, but I'm not gonna count my chickens before they hatch. Okay, well today we are doing the film Dressed to Kill, 1980, a film that I did not realize, but in talking with Iñaki before this, we had seen this film together. Probably 6 or 7 years ago, or maybe 7 or 8, I don't know. So anyways, I am going to read you the short synopsis. You let me know what you think, Iñaki, and we'll get into our perceptions of the film. And just because this film is a very, there is a twist at the end, we'll put it that way. This is a spoiler-filled discussion. Usually we don't say that. I guess I'm being nicer today, so I will warn you there. Okay, here's our synopsis. A mysterious blonde woman kills one of a psychiatrist's patients and then goes after the high-class call girl who witnessed the murder.
Sure.
You gave me a face like you smelled farts, and then you said sure. So, oh well, we will go with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting from what I hear, like, unless I missed it. There was no mention of, the therapist.
The psychiatrist?
Oh yeah.
What do you mean?
Right. Never mind.
Yeah.
I missed that part.
Okay.
Yeah, good enough.
Okay. All right. Iñaki, what did you think of the film? Now that I know this is also a rewatch, if you want to talk about what you thought about this time and maybe your previous perceptions of it.
So I mean, it feels like an American Giallo. From the opening scene, which is almost like a dreamlike sequence where you see, a naked woman taking a shower while, like a very stylized her taking a shower while a man is just shaving his beard, to the music, to many elements within it. It just felt like a giallo. But I mean, beyond that, that sort of feel, it also, I mean, it's an alright movie. It's definitely inspired by Psycho style-wise by giallos. Probably my favorite character was the detective, and but I don't know. I feel conflicted. It's a very problematic movie when you watch it in today's views as well.
Yeah, I think, obviously you're talking about the twist at the end, which I agree has become a bit of a problematic trope, for sure. And I'm glad you brought up the Giallo. That is obviously why I wanted to bring this on. It hits a lot of the spots that Giallos do. As you said, sort of like very hyper stylized, almost a dreamy like atmosphere, both in the beginning and the end. I cannot read my handwriting there, but if you think about American films, a lot of American films, like the Italians, like almost over-sexualize things, they over-stylize things in ways that American films aren't usually doing, and this film really does go to those same places that a lot of those Italian films do. It has a lot more nudity than you'd probably be used to in American films and stuff like that. Personally, I think when I first saw this film, I was, I liked it. It wasn't necessarily my favorite, but after getting into more Giallo films and coming back to this film, I think it sort of like hits almost the same pleasure points that those Giallo films do in terms of like their stylization and liking films for more of the form and how they're doing stuff and like just the stylization itself, rather than like having like a really cool story, because the story here is again very, very basic, and I think coming back to it like that made me really enjoy and at least appreciate a lot of the technical aspects of this film, problematic as it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into the film a little bit. This, of course, is a Brian De Palma film, and I don't know how familiar you are with Brian De Palma, but he kind of has the reputation. He's part of that sort of generation of filmmakers, along with Spielberg and Scorsese, as sort of like the movie brat. Obviously, extremely inspired. Some may say even ripping off Hitchcock, especially in this film. Specifically Psycho, but also you can see glimpses of Rear Window and Vertigo in it as well. He had previously, to this point, probably most notably directed Carrie 2 years prior to that with Sissy Spacek, which was his first real hit. He does have a couple pretty good films before that too, in my view, but Carrie is definitely the film that he would be most known for at that time. And he's sort of one of those one for us, one for me, and one for them directors, where he would kind of have this career where he's directing films that are very commercial hits, stuff like Scarface, Mission Impossible, The Untouchables, Carlito's Way, would be more of like the blockbuster-y type ones. He directed the first Mission Impossible, that is. And he had sort of his own style of thrillers, one of which would include things like Dress to Kill, which he wrote and directed, Body Double, Blowout, Snake Eyes a little bit later on. Films that, have a little bit more, they're a little bit more grounded and kind of give him a chance to play a lot with just sort of like heavy stylization and stuff like that. So really, really distinct style to him. So this is one where it'd definitely be one for him in that sense. So kind of interesting to think about moving in. Okay, so let's get into the film and talk a little bit about what you think might work and what doesn't. So let's talk about the influences to start off, because they're very front and center. They're not subtle in many ways, especially with Psycho. It's almost like, and it's interesting to just sort of put this in historical context too. This was released in 1980. It was released within 3 months of Friday the 13th Part 2, which is sort of like the first sort of sequel in that franchise. And looking at it, it's sort of like, I almost see this as like the indie weird cousin of slashers, and sort of like one way it could go. Those films just so much focus on teenagers and stuff like that, whereas this film is very, very adult. It's clearly geared or targeted towards more adults, with like more adult characters, as well as like more more mature themes in a way. And in that sense, I tend to prefer it versus those slasher films. I have a hard time with teen films. They tend to not be my favorites. I don't know. How do you place this film? I'm kind of rambling on a bit. All of these are sort of descended from the granddaddy Psycho. But it's interesting to think of this as sort of like descended from that, as well as Giallo and a thing like Halloween that came out also just a couple of years prior to it.
Well, I mean, this is... Sorry, trying to make sense a little bit of this film. I think this is a film where inspiration from many areas come from, right? You got... I'm not sure how I did not research De Palma's background with Giallo, so I don't know what his position might be with that. But I'm assuming he watched some Giallo, because it is impossible for him to have made this movie without any or not impossible, but it would be very impressive for him to come up with a certain style of narrative.
Interrupt you right there just to have a quick interjection, because this is a very commonly asked question, And believe it or not, he denies being particularly inspired by Giallo. The only one he admits to actually having seen is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is really interesting because I feel like this film is like kind of the ultimate American Giallo. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. Please go ahead.
Oh no, okay. In that case, then this is 100% based on. I mean, if we're basing it on what he's saying, Giallo is sort of it takes its cues from Hitchcock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Giallo takes the cues from The Master of Suspense, and a lot of the styles that Hitchcock had, Giallo, you could say, perfected them or evolved on it. Not perfected, because I mean it's great, but I mean they further evolved it, especially because Hitchcock died, so he couldn't do it. And perhaps De Palma did the same thing, but on his own. And in that case, it is plausible that De Palma did not. I guess I was wrong, and I'm backtracking what I said before, right? It is plausible that De Palma did not watch any Giallo, or he was not intentionally inspired by Giallos. Nonetheless, stylistically speaking, it does have a lot of Giallo, and perhaps because they're both based on Hitchcock. I mean, and yes, we said Psycho because that's the most plot-wise. That's perhaps the closest to it. But I mean, Hitchcock definitely has other films. I can think of the what was it? There was the one of the man who would kill people with his tie. I forget the name.
Oh, Frenzy? Yeah. Frenzy is probably the closest that Hitchcock came to a Giallo film, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of also shows you that Frenzy is a nasty film. I really like it, but I like a lot of like nasty, more sleazy films, too. But it kind of shows you that Hitchcock was not afraid to take things far. It was more limited by the time. So if Hitchcock had lived like 3 decades later, I wouldn't be surprised if he would be making films very similar to this in terms of like lurid nudity and stuff like that.
Right, exactly. And I think, I mean, this movie is from the 80s, right? The 70s, like the late 70s and the early 80s, but especially the late 70s. U.S. film industry was going through the entire exploitation and grindhouse. So I mean, this feels like the type of movie where De Palma said to himself, hey, I kind of want to make this because it looks fun. I'm going to write one and I'm going to film it, and took his cues and inspirations from Hitchcock, but added the extra sleaziness of the late 70s.
Yeah I mean, it's hard to deny that this film doesn't share some DNA with Giallos, whether that's like direct inspiration, which De Palma continues to deny, or it's they both come from sort of the same heritage, which seems to line up, kind of as you put it, they both being inspired by Hitchcock and Psycho to some extent. So yeah, I think I agree with you there. I mean, I think Halloween 2 also probably inspired from sort of a similar tree where they're all sort of related in some way, at
right,
least.
But with Halloween, with Halloween, I'm forgetting his name now.
Carpenter.
Carpenter, yeah. I mean, Carpenter, he had already. I mean, I don't know if he ever said he was inspired by Giallos, but
he has said that.
He has. That. Yeah. Right, but I knew beyond that. I knew that he was a fan of the genre. I mean, and De Palma maybe did watch more Giallo than he gives credit, but maybe he forgot. I mean, that's a possibility as well, right? On maybe he never intended to make the movie look like a Giallo, but it looks like a fucking Giallo.
Yeah.
And not only that, but screw it, I'm gonna add to it. Even the way the detective works, like
I was gonna bring this up later.
Film ever.
Yeah, I mean, he does the exact same thing where he outsources the detective work to someone else to take care of.
Yeah.
Very successful, I might add. More successful than most Giallo detectives. But yes, I laughed out loud at that stuff too because it's such a Giallo trope. And it's kind of rare to see it so blatantly in American films. But, you know.
Yeah, I don't think I can think of any American film. Because, I mean, there are American films where, like, people, which also is a Giallo trope, where it's the detectives are doing their own work. And, you know, maybe the hero decides to do his or her own work on the side to
like Zodiac or something like that. It's like
right.
The cartoonist is doing a bunch of shit, but the detective's also doing stuff.
Right, and they're both going at the same time. And sometimes it's because, you know, they don't believe the detective or they think they're corrupt. But it's not the, I mean, this is something we have laughed about Giallos all the time, is how, like, we don't want to do the work. So you were a witness here. Solve it for us.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to do like soft blackmail on you in order to put some pressure on you to break into a psychiatrist's office and steal the files. I mean, we're pre-HIPAA, but I'm pretty sure this is quite frowned upon at the time. Okay. Well, yeah. You know, I think one thing that I do really like is, like, let's talk about Angie Dickinson's character, who what's her name? She's the woman in white. So she's the first woman that we see and we're just first introduced to. And, you know, this sort of plot device, Kate Miller, is clearly derived from Psycho. How did you find sort of her character and character role?
And Kate was like kind of an interesting character. I almost wanted to. Part of me wishes to have known how that drama would have unfolded. You know, because it ends at a very juicy moment, right? Like, she gets with this stranger who works in Wall Street, and like has sex with him because, you know, she's bored of being with her husband. And as she writes a love letter to the stranger, she realizes that he had a venereal disease. Like, all of that is gold. I think, like, I was actually really into it, and then, you know, she gets killed, and that's when and this is the part where, you know, I guess it is a copy. Even that is sort of a copy to Hitchcock, right? Because in Hitchcock you also have a juicy drama going on, and then you kill your protagonist. But on this one, the payoff is not as great. I mean, Liz is a great character too, as well as Kate's son. I forget the name, but and Liz is the sex worker.
What do you mean by the payoff is not that great? Just to sort of
like
dive deeper.
By payoff, I mean, I still want to know what would have happened if she had not been killed. I still think that there's a very solid drama there that, in my opinion, actually it was more interesting than you know, the fake plot that Psycho had at the beginning, right? Psycho was with the
she stole the money. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you almost think that the her storyline before that was too good. It's too interesting.
Well, it got juicy. You got juicy, and then she gets killed. She gets killed at the juiciest moment, and I think that's a difference with Psycho. With Psycho, you start with a juicy moment, you have the embezzlement, and then she's just kind of on the run, and this is like the boring moment, and that's when she gets killed. In this one, literally, she finds out that the stranger she slept with has venereal disease, as she cheated on her husband, and you know, she's like, and she forgets her ring in the apartment. That's why she has to go back, and you're like, ooh, there's a lot of suspense on her own story without having her being killed, and the kill almost comes out of left field, but in a way that is, it doesn't come at a low moment like in Psycho. It comes at a high moment, and you know, it pissed me off a little bit. I kind of wanted to know.
Interesting. Okay. Well, you know, I honestly kind of like the way they did that. You're right. It's similar but different than Psycho. I hadn't considered sort of like the emotional arc of the scene, but you're right. She is sort of at like this emotionally heightened sense at that moment where she has to go back into this apartment, and it's a total head fake because you definitely don't see what's about to happening because the film is like totally not about that at that point. And I actually really like that in this film, but in Psycho at least, you're right. It's more at a low point. She had decided already that she's going to bring the money back and she's going to do the right thing, and so it comes out of nowhere. But the emotional feeling is very different in Psycho, and it's probably a little bit sadder in Psycho. Whereas like Dressed to Kill, you are a little bit more intrigued at what's going to happen with the VD and all that stuff with her. But I like both. I think both are really good. Yeah. But what else did you make of Angie Dickinson? We'll get into that elevator scene because I think that elevator scene and the whole sequence is probably one of the more notable, more important scenes in the film. But let's talk a little bit more about Angie Dickinson and as Kate Miller. Mm-hmm.
She was great. She was great. I mean, her character was. As a character, she's a very conflicted woman. She is definitely on the slightly older side by now, but she's sexy and she knows she's sexy, and she's kind of playing hard to get with the strangers because she's married, but at the same time she's sick of her husband. I mean, all of that. It was just kind of a fun thing to watch. For example, the museum scene where she's sort of following the stranger she ends up hooking up with later. That back and forth, even though it's, you could say it's a silly scene. And this is not just her. This is De Palma doing a really good job. Granted, again, perhaps inspired by, Hitchcock, but it's still very good. The entire back and forth between her first view and third view camera of her chasing or following the man, and then being perhaps followed, and then following him again, and you get to explore the entire space of the museum as well. All of that, just I think all the scenes with her were great. She definitely had a presence as well.
Yeah, I really like Angie Dickinson in the whole film too, in the first 30 minutes of the film too. I think the museum stuff, I think that is a fantastic sequence. I think it's awesome. It's not even a suspense sequence, but it's like this kind of weird set piece. But one of the things that I really, really do like about De Palma is he is extremely visual in how he does stuff, and I tend to like that with film because I think it really takes advantage of the uniqueness of film, and just taking advantage of we're going to show you, not tell, basically. And so you get to see everything that's going through her head. Originally, De Palma had told at least Angie Dickinson that they were going to do voiceover over that scene, and both to his delight and to Angie Dickinson's, when they edited it, they realized that her acting was so strong throughout it, and it was so clear what was going on, that they actually didn't need it at all. And I completely agree. The scene plays out really, really well just with that. You get to just see her making very banal observations, or remembering banal things like picking up the turkey and things like that. And it's just super clear. You see her observe. You already know what's going in through her mind from the psychiatrist, how she's sexually frustrated, which is interesting. And I think that's something that, I don't know. I mean, she's a very interesting character, as is Nancy Allen's character. And so we see her attraction, and I just think the whole scene is done super, super well. And I think this is the part where just De Palma really shines. It's even the scene, the part where the camera is just whirling when she finally comes out of the museum, and the stranger eventually holds out the glove and stuff, and the camera is just tilting and whirling and stuff like that. I just really, really enjoy stuff like that. And, I did a little bit of research before recording this podcast, and apparently just that shot and stuff like that, they had to do it over and over and over again, just because De Palma had it mapped out exactly how he wanted it. And it's such a simple shot. It's just getting her from point A to point B, and then having the stranger basically pull her into the car. but it's just really, really well done and executed. So I think from a technical standpoint, and just from a purely visual one, I think it's excellent. Even though it's like usually we save these sort of like scene highlights and set pieces, especially for giallos, to talk about murders. This one has nothing. There's no suspense in it. It's not really about that. It's just about the character and displaying something very visually. And, in terms of Hitchcock, the sequence is definitely different from Hitchcock in most ways. I think it's probably partially inspired by sort of like the museum in Vertigo, just sort of that setting and looking at things like that. But I think this is something that's very unique to De Palma in this sense.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you're right. I mean, this is, to be honest, this is my favorite scene probably in the movie.
I wouldn't blame you for that. No.
And granted, I think there's actually quite a bit. I disagree with you on the suspense. I think this scene has a lot of suspense. But what makes it very impressive is that it's a suspense on the unknown. It's like, is she gonna catch him? Is he gonna catch her? What are they gonna do if they do? And I mean, that's a whole drama. And yeah, you can tell that the storyboard for this scene, I bet, is extremely detailed, because to tell the story the way it's told, and especially there's zero dialogue for a solid, what is it? How long is the scene? Like,
it's like 15 minutes almost.
15 minutes. Like. Yeah, zero dialogue for 15 minutes and telling such a very good story, right? Between that, so there's probably really good storyboarding. And then the editing between, the moments where, she realizes that she lost her glove, or she dropped the glove, and later that he touched her with the glove, and just the play of even the way the gloves, it's just a fucking item, becomes so important, right?
Right. Right.
Which I always love the around the end when she kind of says like fuck it and tosses her other glove, and then her right hand glove comes in again. It's just all of that, or left hand, I guess. Yeah, left hand. It's all of that. I mean, I don't know. It's just very beautiful to watch. It tells you a full story, and it ends that transition at the end where basically she's getting pleasured by this stranger in the car, and you have the city with the horning and her moan, just all of that, very good.
Yeah, A+ filmmaking for sure. I mean, it's also amazing that like the stranger literally doesn't have to do anything. I don't even know if we see his face the entire time. I mean, but it's like everything we need to know about him is established. We don't need to know anything else. So it like just shows you everything you need to know. And I mean, it's totally through her perspective too, which I think, I mean, is correct. And to go into a little bit of background, Brian De Palma wanted Angie Dickinson, who I guess at this point was mostly known for a show. Well, she'd been around for a number of years. She was almost 50 at the time of doing this, but she was known for a show called Police Women, which is a very groundbreaking show. Just like one of the first shows to show a female cop. And he wanted her because he wanted someone that was likable and willing to die in the first 30 minutes. And I think she is perfect in that sense, and I think she's really well cast. This is actually her favorite movie that she's done. She ironically enough, as problematic as this film might be, this is her favorite, and she has kind of disowned Policewoman, so to speak, even though it's like very signature and groundbreaking in certain ways. And she thought this is like the finest bit of acting that she had done. And I think she's phenomenal. I think she's great. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, this is the part where we gotta separate the story versus the the filmmaker and the style. I mean, this is. De Palma is, so I'm not a huge fan of many of his movies. I actually do not care for Scarface. I did like Carrie. I liked Carrie a lot, but I did not care for Scarface. I think you listed a bunch of other ones, and most of them I don't care for them too much. I'm
guessing you've mostly seen his blockbuster type stuff, though.
Yes, indeed. But I mean, even though I don't care for many of them, I've always appreciated his attention to detail, his editing and transitions. I mean, on the technical aspects, De Palma, and his directing of actors, actually, all of that. De Palma is a very good director. She's a very good director. I just, don't care much about his movies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting also to just, if we're going to have an aside and talk about De Palma a little bit, is a very interesting contrast to Argento, because they're both extremely visual, but I feel like they both sort of manifest it in very different ways. I feel like De Palma is often a little bit more concerned with narrative and stuff like that. If you look at the films Argento was doing at the time, he is doing Suspiria and Inferno, which are just like these psychedelic, like totally jump headfirst into like this dreamlike state. De Palma never really did that. More in I don't know, when he was doing stuff like this is probably as dreamy as he gets. And so I feel like he's thinking and concocting up like sequences like The Museum that really do have a narrative and center focus, and he's trying to think in the audience's head of what they're thinking about and stuff like that. And I feel like Argento did a lot less of that, and is and as a result is a little bit more incoherent as a filmmaker, but also kind of helps to really create these like other worlds and stuff like that. Personally, I am more in the Argento camp than the De Palma one, because I like those sort of like other worlds and stuff like that. But I do really respect De Palma, and especially his gift for creating images and stuff like that. I think some of his technical aspects, I think he's definitely one of the strongest technical filmmakers we've had.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think technically speaking, as a director, De Palma is a better director than Argento, technically speaking.
Yeah, and narratively as well, I'd say.
Well, so that's what I mean by as a director. So a director,
Okay.
Like the way I view a director is a director, puts a scene, tries to tell a story. I mean, not a director doesn't do everything, but right, like a good director or there are directors who basically are in the editing process, even though they're not the editor, but they're there. They're throughout the entire process. De Palma, I imagine, is one of those.
I gotta imagine too. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think so.
And a director, at the end of the day, the most important part of a film is its narrative. I mean, it can be crazy and wacky and like completely surreal, but there has to be a narrative that one can follow one way or another. And in that sense, De Palma does a really good job. Again, 15 minutes of no dialogue, and you have a very clear and fun narrative to follow. Argento, he does that sometimes, and sometimes he does not. And that's when you realize Argento is more of a cinematographer. Like, that's the thing he started off on. And there are cinematographers that become good directors, and there are others, and then Argento is probably one of those. But you can tell that for him it's way more the visual than even necessarily telling a story.
Yeah, I mean, we've recently brought on Fulci and Argento films, and Fulci famously cast a lot of shade on Argento and had called him like basically a great technician masquerading as a director, I think, at one point. So kind of funny to see it come out that way. But I agree. Argento oftentimes seems to get really bored with the narrative and just like think of like interesting visuals and stuff like that. And I mean, what interesting visuals he can come up with are phenomenal often, but narratively, I think he's weaker for sure, and a little bit less of a well-rounded filmmaker.
I mean, it gets closer to perhaps the whole art type film, as in it's almost more art and visual than necessarily narratively strong.
Yeah. I mean, certainly something like Inferno and even Suspiria it's like their narratives are often the weakest thing of the film. And yeah. So anyways, we don't need to get more into that. I mean, I guess it's no shock that we got into this Argento thing. I mean, I feel like Argento and De Palma are kind of like the great acolytes of Hitchcock in some ways, and sort of the descendants of that school. So maybe no surprise there. And we've talked about a lot of Argento films. Okay, well, Let's move on. Would you like to talk about the other lead, or would you kind of like to dive into? Maybe let's get into the elevator sequence too, and just sort of finish off Angie Dickinson's or Kate Miller's, I should say, part of the film. So I think my favorite parts of this whole movie are the first act, which is basically Kate Miller and Angie Dickinson's. And I honestly wouldn't replace much of that. I just think everything is done really well. If you think about Angie Dickinson and her acting job too, it's like she really only speaks in like that brief scene with Michael Caine, which is maybe 5 minutes long or so. And the rest of the film, she does it sheerly through acting and not through speaking. So we get to the elevator, and this is right when she finds out she has a venereal disease. I will come back to this in a second. There's a bit of a funny anecdote with this. And so it really distracts you. And then eventually she comes out into the hallway, and I really like this shot where the camera just slowly zooms past her or walks past her. And it's very, very slow. And I like that about De Palma, is like his camera movements feel very slow and deliberate and almost elegant in a way. And he kind of goes into like the stairwell that has sort of like this red light, and we finally see the killer or Michael Caine, and nothing happens, and he's just extremely patient in how he concocts the whole scene. She goes down the elevator to the bottom, realizes she forgot her ring, so stuff is just getting worse and worse and worse. The little girl kind of like makes eye contact with her, and you can tell she even feels more guilty. And then finally she comes back up after the little girl and her mom have disembarked, and then finally we kind of see the razor stick in her face, and it comes into focus, and then we see it all through that mirror. Slicing. We get a very Argento Giallo shot where the razor is almost at the eyeball, and then finally her throat slit. It's a very, very precise, violent scene, and it and at the end of it, it finally translates the narrator out to Nancy Allen, or our primary protagonist. So, anyways, let's talk about that sequence. Any thoughts?
It was fun to watch. It wasn't as gory as other giallos that we've seen. It's more of one of the sort of quick and dirty, but very stylized on because there's a lot of use of mirrors and things like that. I guess throughout the entire sequence, probably narratively speaking, it does a really great job at introducing our next lead. Right, which is her name is the character's name is Liz, and the actress is
Nancy Allen, Liz Blake.
Yeah. So I think it does a really good job at both one giving you the shocker of the kill, to introducing this new character who literally is there because she sees her being killed, and you don't even know that Liz is a sex worker. For a second, I always thought she was like purchasing an apartment or whatever, and then like later you learn that she's a sex worker, but her grabbing the knife, inmates seeing her and screaming, thinking that she was the killer. All of that is just really good. And again, the use of mirrors, because she sees the killer, I think, through that corner mirror.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So overall a good scene, good set pieces, and then of course the ending with the elevator door hitting the arm of the dead body. Yeah, solid.
Yeah. I love the elevator scene. I think it's fantastic. I think it's definitely a really, really great kill. This film, even though maybe some would call it a slasher, it feels very different from your sort of standard slashers. And there really isn't only one actual kill that occurs in it, and it's this one. And I think it's a really, really great one to go. And it's just really well filmed. Love the touches of the mirror. The blood looks great. And like, I'm always a sucker for like the razor like pressing up against the eyeball. And it's brutal. It's good. And then you're right. I actually find Nancy Allen to be really funny, just the way it kind of transitions, because she's like talking about like buying like Autotron, some stock from some guy, or she's getting like a stock tip from him, and then like immediately, and immediately the guy just like books it. He's just like he runs away, and Nancy Allen is literally, who's a very like slight woman. She's like very petite. She's small, and she's like kind of left holding the the murder weapon. There. And so I like the way it's all executed. Again, very, very visual, very De Palma, a lot of slow-mo, a lot of like tilts and angles and stuff like that. Use of mirrors is really good. So yeah. Okay. Well, then let's move on to the second and third part of our films. I think those are probably my two favorite scenes here, the museum and the elevator. I think there's some other good set pieces and sequences in here, but those are probably my two favorites in the first act. Okay, so what do you think of Liz Blake, played by Nancy Allen?
I actually also liked her character. It's... I don't think we've seen... I think this is the first film that we've seen where the main character is a sex worker. And...
I think that's right, yeah.
And I don't think it's very common to see films where the main character is a sex worker. And, and it doesn't treat the job as... It doesn't show her situation being shitty or anything like that. I mean, she kind of works just like everyone else. She goes through an escort company where they give give her clients, but also I don't know. It's just like there's that part. There's the part like, because she is a person who works in the street. She has an attitude about things when talking to the cop, when talking to different characters. That is fun to watch. She's pretty fearless in many instances. Like she's scared of the killer. She's scared of a blonde woman, but she's okay getting into what would be stereotypically dangerous-looking people for a movie in the 80s, written by a white guy, aka black people. Which, again, they attack her because, again, it's a movie written by a white guy in the 80s, so black people are bad. But beyond that...
Yeah, I mean, I actually have less of an issue with that. I think most of my issues come with like the Michael Caine character, but yeah, I mean, fair enough.
I guess what's funny is because like in the last Giallo we watched, every man that was set in New York, every man that you saw was a could-be killer or rapist. And in this one, like there's a scene where she's escaping of this blonde woman, and then you see this group of black guys just listening to music, and she kind of goes close to them, and I'm thinking, oh, that's a really smart idea, because then they will see the killer and they'll protect her from the killer. But then they and then I thought even further, thinking, wow, if this works. And this is in the film, then, this is a pretty woke film when it comes to this type of issues. Especially because New York in the 80s, people were so afraid of black people that, a man was able to kill them and get away with self-defense in court, even though the three black men were teenagers and did not have any weapon on them. And this is before you stand your ground. Ergo... It was a shitty society in New York in the 80s, and I thought, hey, this movie could be really woke, and then it was not, because then the man tried to rape her.
I don't know if they tried to rape her, but they tried to harass her at the minimum.
Well, they literally said like, "We're gonna break your ass," and then one was like, "We're gonna fuck you." I'm pretty sure
saying it is different than doing, but all right. I don't know if I mean, they were talking shit for sure, and they probably would have messed with her. I don't know. I'm not willing to go that far, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Okay. Well, how do we get onto this part? Oh, Nancy Allen. Okay. Yeah, I liked her character as well, Liz Blake. I thought it was a good, and I think this is one part where I definitely depend the script and De Palma's characters here. As like, I think both of the female characters are really good and fairly fully developed. Definitely more fully developed than maybe in all the other male characters. I'd say even including Michael Caine. And you know what's interesting is that Nancy Allen. You know what the Razzies are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the worst. She was actually nominated for a Razzie for this award, which I found to be incredibly unbelievable.
For this film?
Yeah, because I think she's great in this film. And
the Razzies
I think
not very trustworthy.
No, yeah, and I mean, I was gonna say I think that might speak more towards I don't know, internalized misogyny than anything else too, about like people that are doing those awards. Just because I think she's really good in this film, and I don't know, I think she gives a good, and she has a unique performance in it for sure. And I thought she was very funny. Yeah, I mean, like it's I think she brings a lot of humanity and heart to the film, and she really carries the second half of it, in my view, at least.
I agree. No, I totally agree. I mean, it was she's a fun character to be along with. In fact, I mean that's a person you follow through the entire rest of the movie. I mean, you could say that the son is there, but it's kind of like the gadgets nerd. That's it.
Yeah, he's the sidekick. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing I thought of too is like Nancy Allen's taking all these tips. Do you think in 2021 she's like a crypto billionaire? She got the early tip on crypto in 2009 and bought it. Sold her Autotron and bought some crypto. So bought some BTC.
Maybe she bought some Apple already. She had stocks on that.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, there's a young man called William Gates. He's a company called Microsoft. I'll invest in that too.
Would have been the right era. I mean, 5 years later, buy some MSFT. Would have been a very early investor. Yeah, I thought the phone call scene that she does, where she pretends to talk to her mom and gets more clients just to buy stocks, I thought that was really funny. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was like a really, actually, in a weird way, a fairly positive portrayal as like an interesting sex worker character. Like, yeah, not really a streetwalker so much as like a higher end escort.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's keep it moving. All right. So, what did you think of? Here's one. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. You know, we know that these soundtracks, especially in the Italian films, play such an important role in them, and I mean, I think they really punch way above their weight. What did you think of Just to Kill soundtrack?
Extremely good. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so going back to the museum scene, the music was also a big element of that scene, and it sort of it has the ups and downs of it, and same with the I don't know, it kind of walks with you throughout the entire moment. I mean, there's a museum scene, then there's the scene where she finds about the VD, and then her kill. All those moments, it works really well. It did not distract me. I guess that's probably
interesting. Yeah, I feel like the way the film uses the score is actually very different from Italian films. I feel like it's a lot more classic, like Hitchcock, where the score really swells up and stuff like that. Whereas like people like Argento or even New York Ripper are using the score in slightly different ways. I think it's a really strong score too, in sort of that classical style, the way that Hitchcock would maybe use a Bernard Herrmann score. This one is actually, ironically enough, done by an Italian guy, Pino Donaggio, who did a ton of the De Palma films. Yeah, I think it's good too. I actually kind of slightly prefer the way the Italians use it. I know this is going to be like hearsay to some people because the score is pretty beloved, but but yeah, I like the score. But I end up like if I had to grade it against something like Deep Red or Suspiria, I actually kind of like the Italians slightly more.
Well, so yeah, don't get me wrong. When doing comparison, I mean, we got films with Ennio Morricone and, you know, like other great fucking composers. I'm not a huge fan of Gremlins, but I mean, there's other movies with better Goblins. I keep on saying Gremlins. I'm not a huge fan of Goblin, but I mean, but they're films with, you know, composers that I really do admire quite a bit, and even Goblin is just more memorable. And in that sense, I would agree with you that, you know, if I'm buying the score alone, I will 100% buy the scores of a Giallo film before I buy the score for Dressed to Kill by De Palma. However, I still think it was a really good score.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very good classical movie score. Yeah, I mean, and like Argento, as we've started to see in some of his later films, he didn't always use the score quite right. I mean, he played some heavy metal over funerals, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
Which I just can't support. Okay.
Again, Argento's not the best director out there.
You know, I think Argento's problem at a certain point was like he had no one to tell him no, and he just was allowed too much of his own indulgences at a certain point, and I think eventually it messed him up. Okay, well let's get back into this. Do you want to talk about any of the other set pieces? I think the subway scene, the psychiatrist's offices are both good. They're both just, you know, solid suspense sequences. I think the way De Palma sort of does these things is really good, but they're all kind of good in the same way. It's just like very coordinated, very storyboarded, very well planned out. I don't know. Did any of those jump out to you?
I mean, there is some for the subway sequence. I guess I really like the her stare off with the cop in the subway. There's a very solid back and forth from her angle looking up to the police officer, and then the camera going from that, and then just having the subway lights going on and off because New York subway sucks, and all of that I thought was just a very cool scene and sort of intense, because you know that as soon as that cop that is mean mugging her leaves, shit's gonna happen.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I think the rhythm of that scene is really, really well done and very planned. It kind of mixes like times of quiet, like where she's talking with the cop, and like sort of the tone changes, and then the danger just immediately comes back. But also earlier on, it's like even when she's waiting for the subway, and she had just been followed in, and she kind of goes up to the black, I don't want to call them thugs, but the black people that end up harassing her.
She called them punks.
Punks. Okay, there you go. Punks. Okay, we'll call them punks then, for the sake of this simplicity. But even the moment before they start talking to her, where she's just sort of looking, and then we see people peeking their heads out, looking for the subway and stuff like that, and it's just very quiet, and we just sort of hear the humdrum of like a New York subway station, and how you like that contrast with, she was just running away from Michael Caine, the killer. So it's just a very it has just really nice rhythms and suspense and tension to it. I think the suspense sequences of this are just really well done and have a great sense of like geography and space and timing.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of those where you know what's going to happen. So the suspense doesn't come with not knowing what's going to happen, but it's what's going to happen. You just don't know when. So, and this is why the cop part really pops to me, and it's the the cop is going to get off the train. And as soon as the cop gets off the train, that trouble is going to come. You know that either the punks are going to arrive and do whatever nonsense they were planning to do to her, or the blonde killer is going to arrive, Michael Caine, and slash her. and and that's the moment where you're waiting and you're just seeing the cop's face as the light goes on and off, and then the train stops. He mean mugs her one more time and then walks away, and then the punks arrive and the killer arrive and everyone arrives, and
I know.
she's randomly saved by
the kid.
the kid.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, literally everyone was on that scene. It's like the taxi driver even took out like the police person that was protecting her at that time, like the other blonde woman. So it was a very, very crowded scene with everyone involved. But yes, you do know how that's going to go. But yeah, I like how it just, I mean, you have these like quiet reprieves and stuff like that, and just very tense and really well done. Okay. Psychiatrist office, I think it's another great scene, but for a lot of the same reasons. It's like she takes off her clothes. There's the score. It's super rainy. We got Keith Gordon, the kid, through his binoculars, looking in, kind of a rear window type situation there. I mean, I like. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's too much to talk about there. It's a well done, executed scene, but for a lot of the reasons that make the other scenes really, really well done too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if we. Well, this is a difficult thing, right? Like, I like to say I've seen a lot of movies, but I haven't seen everything, not at all. So I don't know how many films of that era, would have a woman try to distract a man using like seduction to search something, the way that she did. I don't know how often you would see that in a mainstream movie. Perhaps a lot of the Grindhouse and B films of that era definitely did that, but I'm not sure for. The reason I mentioned that is because I thought it was very effective as a narrative, right? She kind of gets undressed just so to set up in the mind of Michael Caine that it's like, hey, you get undressed, I got undressed, you get undressed, and while you're doing that, I'll go to the bathroom. I mean, yeah, it's simple, but plot-wise, I thought that was kind of a clever thing.
I also admire how explicit it is. It's like Nancy Allen is very direct. She's not really beating around the bush at all.
No, she's not, and that comes with the character, right? You already know her character is very like, whenever she talks to someone, she's very direct.
Yeah. I think at one point she's like tells Michael Caine, she's like, "Do you want to fuck me?" And he's like, in his very understated British way, he's like, "Oh yes." I like laughing.
It did with a cup of tea.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Will there be some biscuits with that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I think those things sum up the strengths well. So why don't we talk just a little bit about the opening conclusion and Michael Caine's character before we wrap it up. So opening conclusion are kind of interesting scenes, and I'm still not totally sure how I feel about them. I think they're tremendously filmed. Both of them, these sort of like dreamlike scenes, and they sort of show the subconscious of different characters, both at the beginning with Kate Miller and at the end with Liz, and sort of the terror at the end. Both really, really well filmed scenes, and I don't know, what'd you think of them? And then we'll get to Michael Caine real fast.
So the opening scene, that one I'm not sure. It's funny because I did not think about it until you just mentioned it. That right, there's sort of an echo, right? The opening begins with the shower, and then the woman screaming. Although you don't know why she's screaming because they don't show any blood or anything. But yeah, it has that, and I mean, and it transitions directly to the same woman having sex. So I'm not sure. And
although
then the ending,
very unsatisfying sex.
Yes, but in both cases she's screaming, and her scream is supposed to be a moan. I don't know. I mean, obviously she talks about how she fixed it. So yeah. Anyways, and then at the end, you end with again this time Liz in the shower and her getting killed. I mean, so yeah, you could see. I can see now that the opener and closer were on purpose that way. However, they're very different because the opening scene is probably the part that reminds me the most of a giallo. It's just the music that is used in that scene is a very like calm 1970 orchestra kind of system, the kind of music, because it has sort of a beat, but it's all instrumental, and it's sort of just exploring the beauty of her, and she's very stylized in a manner that is very giallo-like. I mean, that's not from Hitchcock. I don't think I've seen that type.
Yeah, I don't think Hitchcock was allowed to do that in his time. He might have if he was born later, but yeah, no, certainly.
But I mean, Hitchcock wasn't even that stylized. I mean, this is a very stylized. It almost seems like a picture because it sort of zooms in where you see like her husband is shaving while she's showering, and it's sort of zooming into her body and all that. I don't know. It feels like a very calm personal space, and then of course someone grabs her from behind and she screams, but all of that has a very strong giallo moment, because giallo kind of does that too. It has like that many giallo films have that calm opening with a nice music and then a woman screaming. The last scene instead feels like a ripoff of the famous scene from Psycho, period. until the end, where like the last scene has the angles that Psycho had. They're not like the first one is kind of sexy and soothing. The last one is top of the shower, the water scene, from you can see the water going in. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then third what's it called, first person view from the outside of the killer, which is more of the Psycho style, because with Psycho again, you see the killer getting towards the shower before killing her. And then of course the end, that's a little flip because she notices the killer and all that stuff. But I mean, nonetheless, it's just that it's so different that I actually did not put them two and two together. I mean, they both begin and end with a shower dream sequence, but the end is so much. The end, to me, felt like it's De Palma saying, "Hey, if I didn't make it clear that I like Hitchcock, here you go."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they both kind of call into the shower scene of Psycho, but you're right. The second one does more, too. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of dream sequences. So I have mixed feelings on them. I think they're tremendously executed. So in the end, I kind of come out to a bit of a wash where I'm okay with them just because they're so well done. I mean, I like the silent part, too, where Michael Caine, I think, in Fantasyland breaks out of Bellevue Hospital. I wish we had a Bellevue Hospital here in Seattle, where we could send all the lunatics to live with all the rich people. But sadly we don't live in that world. But yeah, I mean, I think filming wise, I think they're both perfectly done. I don't know. I'm just a little lukewarm on the dream sequences in general.
I mean, the Bellevue Hospital scene was very good. That's well, is it called Bellevue Hospital?
Yeah.
Okay,
they call it Bellevue Hospital. I was laughing. For those of you that don't know, Bellevue is a wealthy suburb in the Seattle area.
So the Bellevue Hospital scene, I really like that scene. It's beautiful as the camera is zooming out and you see all the crazies just looking down onto the crime scene. It's really good. But yeah, it had no place. I mean, at that moment, I thought, okay, is the movie going to continue? Because if so, then I have not seen this movie. Because I completely forgot that from the first time I watched it. And then, you have the first person scene, and I'm just like, well how, was there only one nurse in that entire hospital? Like, how the fuck did he escape?
Yeah.
And ultimately, then you got the shower scene. It has probably the only good jump scare, that shower scene, which is, her being killed from the little medicine cabinet.
Right. We see him on like the weird mirror. Lots of mirrors in this movie.
Yeah, and then, but I mean, even my notes say, "Fucking dream." So yeah, I was not happy with it either.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're kind of like me. I don't know how much of a fan of dream sequences you are, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really care for them in general.
Yeah, no, I'm it's very out of place, and it's just sort of, I don't know. It's kind of like I mean, but that De Palma already had pulled the shit with Carrie, because Carrie also has a stupid ass dream sequence like that at the end.
Yeah, which people loved, which is why I'm sure he did it again. I wonder a little bit if we are in the minority here where we don't like stuff like that. Personally, I just don't care for it. I also...
People loved the dream sequence in Carrie at the end?
Yeah, people do. I personally don't get it. I don't understand. I mean, I am generally against stuff like that. I just don't think it adds too much. But yeah, I mean... he brought it back. I mean, I've heard him say that he brought it back kind of by popular demand, so to speak.
Oh, well, yeah. It was dumb.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let's start to wrap up here. Michael Caine and his character. I'll give you the floor.
I mean, all right. So there's so much floor. So if we're talking about his character itself, and just completely forget about, the overall social message and the terrible trope that this film, once again is regurgitated from other films. If we forget all of that for a second, his character is fine.
I mean, I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but I almost feel like this might be one of the earliest examples of it. But I mean, it has become a problematic trope for sure, and this film is part of it.
I think this was, the earliest example is attributed to Psycho.
Okay. Well, I guess it took the wrong lessons from that film then.
Right. And in Psycho, in fact, so this is the earliest example when it's actually a transsexual. Psycho, it's more of a transvestite. The man was schizophrenic, but he was a man dressing as a woman. While in this one, it's straight up like it's supposed to be a trans woman whose man's side somehow doesn't want her to become a woman, so the woman's side starts killing. All of that is fucked in so many ways. But I mean, is it the first one to do this? I'm not sure. The whole concept of a man dressing as woman came from like. So I was actually I had listened to a or watched a YouTube video by a YouTuber called Lindsay Ellis a long time ago, and it's when I watched this I was like, oh, she did mention this movie in that video, which is she goes through the entire history of transphobic tropes, and this one was one of many that came around that era. But all the other ones were like B movies. So, or Grindhouse, So this was like the first one that came like on big theaters, big budget. So there were others, but this one is probably the most egregious and the most famous for doing this. And it is the first one to just straight up no longer say, oh, it was a man dressed as a woman, or oh, it was transvestite, or oh, it was, like a sociopath or with multiple personality disorder. No, they say she was a trans woman, but wanted to be like was confused, and that's why she killed. And you're like, all right, that's wrong in so many levels, and it almost pokes fun of it. So no, it's just it's really bad in many ways. That's
right.
Perhaps. Just that's it. It's just very bad.
Yeah. I mean, there you have it. I mean, I think that part is pretty indefensible. I would defend the portrayals of women. I think this film. I think this film was also accused of being a little bit misogynist at the time, but I don't know if I agree with that part. But I do think the trans part of it is I don't know, fairly indefensible in my view, at least.
Yeah, no, I saw a lot of articles talking about the misogynism, and I'm like, perhaps we watched too many Giallo films by now. Giallo films.
Yeah.
That I'm like, no, this is not misogynistic at all. Like, I mean, the two main characters, the strongest characters here are women, and they're like actually
They're fully realized.
They're
really
realized.
interesting characters. Yeah.
Exactly. And in fact, there's only one kill, and sure, you see them naked, and you could say that that's, exploiting their bodies and sexuality, but or it has the male gaze as I think it's a term that it's used. However, I mean, it's a fucking 70s or 80s. I mean, I don't know.
It's a different conversation at the very least. I mean, it's on a different level than
exactly
the trans conversation.
Like, could it be better on that matter on that area? Sure, but the indefensible part is the whole conversation that it creates on trans issues, and basically just reinforcing the concept that and the trope that the trans person is the killer, or more specifically, the trans woman is always a killer, right. A person not to be trusted.
Right, which plays out today with like fear of people going to bathrooms and shit like that. Which, I mean, like it's just as relevant today as it was in 1980. Or I mean, it's perhaps more relevant, I would say.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, it was relevant then. I'm pretty sure the amount of people, trans people who were killed then, for all these reasons, was much higher then than now. Now we just talk about it. That's only
per capita. Per capita. To be clear.
I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of killing in New York back then. But I don't know. In short, this is a very problematic factor. If we were to take out this factor, let's say we had switched this to, instead of being trans, the person had multiple personality disorders, kind of like in the concept of split.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's still problematic. Perhaps.
Less so. Except, a lot less so.
A lot less so. Especially because, from what I know, multiple personality disorder, I think today psychologists have more and more gotten rid of that term because it's not real. People do not have two. First, it affects very few people, but also most of the time it's not like you have two separate personalities, but in fact you just don't have one full personality. So it would always, so the trope that you see in movies, it's almost like a non-existent thing. It never happens, and therefore that makes sense. Trans people, on the other hand, do exist. It does happen. And they do exist, and they are actually one of the biggest victims of violence, and these tropes do not help. There's a comparison between this and Silence of the Lambs, where also the killer is, some people would read it as a trans woman, but in Silence of the Lambs they did a strong job saying over and over again, no.
Right. I think Silence of the Lambs was a little more aware of, or it was a little more careful. I feel like De Palma, who's a provocateur often, and this time it in a pretty poor way.
Exactly, yeah. Because Silence of the Lamb, over and over again, they emphasize now trans people are actually, trans women are, I don't know if the statistics were right, but they're like, trans women are way less likely to commit a violence crime than any other type of person. Maybe they made that up, but the whole point is that the movie was really trying to emphasize.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, on a lighter note, while we wrap this up, I have some random trivia things. When Angie Dickinson finds the form about the venereal disease, the date listed on the form is November 17th, 1980, November 17th is the birthday of director Martin Scorsese, who is his very close friend. So he put Martin Scorsese's birthday on the venereal disease thing. And I just wanted to let you know that if I ever get the opportunity to put a date on a venereal disease form, I'm putting your birthday on it. So,
all right, fair enough.
A very good friend, Iñaki. This is just a testament to our friendship.
Fair enough.
And also kind of De Palma's fucked up sense of humor. It makes me think that I probably would have gotten along with De Palma for better or for worse.
Oh yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, what souvenir are you taking from this film?
The glove.
Okay. I'm taking the computer, Keith Gordon's computer, the Peter, as he calls it.
Oh yeah.
I'm an electrical engineer, and I have no clue what the hell is going on with that computer. But I'll take it.
It held. Wait, how is it? It
held binary.
Yeah, it held like 75. I didn't write it, but it was like some random number. It's like 75 binaries, and you're like,
yeah.
What? Like, no, the computer does this. I made this up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty silly. That character is supposed to be a bit of a stand-in for De Palma as a kid growing up, who is a bit of a science tech nerd. Okay. Who won the movie?
I mean, De Palma, probably. De Palma, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I feel like it has to be De Palma. His fingerprints are all over the film. I love the style of this film. I think that's the thing that holds up the most. I mean, we didn't even talk about it, but some of his diopter shots where there's a lot of stuff grounded in the foreground and the background, and they're both in focus, and we see just sort of like the danger in the front, in behind them, and they're just sort of both in the same frame. I love all of that. I think it's just, I don't know. I think it's great. And I think the patience and the editing in which he puts together the scenes, I think it's just a technical masterclass in terms of that stuff.
I agree. And then, so to harp back a little bit on the Michael Caine character, and let's forget about the trans issue for a second. Storytelling wise, his character, one of the things that I always thought was very fascinating was whenever he was having his quote unquote transformation, there was a very, very fun play with mirrors.
Yes.
And I mean, whether it was there, whether he was listening to Bobby's tapes, and all those moments, and I thought that was very well done. Again, as a narrative element to tell the story.
Yeah. I mean, it was almost like that was definitely very intentional. I noticed that too. Is like every time he looks in the mirror, he sort of sees himself, and I don't know what the correct word is, but yeah, he feels something there. I don't know. Okay, all right. Let's finish up. Rating.
I mean, I cannot get it. I get
Tough to rate.
tough to rate because objectively speaking, I think as a film, it's a high 7, but it gets negative points for the message, and you know, I don't care if we're talking about like, oh, it's a movie from that era. It's like, yeah, fuck you. Still, you get negative points. Therefore, I'll give it a 6.5.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think this film would be almost just about perfect, 9 or 10, just in terms of technical aspects. I just admire the hell out of a lot of what this film does. But, you know, I'll stick it in the alligator pit with the New York Ripper, and maybe the New York Ripper will quack it down. So I'll give it the same rating as the New York Ripper at 8.5.
8.5? Oh, that's high rating.
No, I mean, I think like this is like one of the most visually arresting films that, you know, I see. So I love so much of it, but it's a problematic favorite for myself.
Man, okay. I'll put it to a 7.
Okay. I mean, we don't have to. We can disagree. I mean, I really can't defend parts of this film, but
no, you've convinced me. Like, I mean, if we're looking objectively at the technical aspect, I mean, I'm still giving it negative points on the on the shittiness of it. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film that's well worth watching. Just it has so much going for it that it is too bad that it goes in that direction, because I do think doesn't really add too much to the film, at least for me. Okay, well, that concludes this episode of Film to Film. You can send us an email at zafilmtofilm@gmail.com, as well as tweet at us at zafilmtofilm. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks. Ciao.
Ciao. Or bye.